love me true, all my life complete.
Just waiting for a signal to get started here. Okay, we are on. Toronto Film Festival couldn't be more ecstatic to have shown this film for our opening night. I think it was one of the liveliest nights ever at the festival. But for you guys, you were seeing it for the first time with an audience yourself. What was that like, going through this again with an audience?
It's always excruciating to talk about yourself, and to see yourself talking about yourself is kind of even worse. But I thought Davis did an incredible job with what could have been a subject matter that might have been kind of for train spotter type fans only. I think he made it something that was accessible for film lovers, and I certainly was very happy with how it worked out.
I rather like talking about myself.
Singer.
No, it is excruciating, and you just hope that it serves a purpose, and that purpose might be that you know, that the film, if you're interested in the sort of rock band era and one of the bands of that era and how it operates, how four people can work together. Because they don't, you know, painters, you don't get four people hanging out together, or poets or novelists, or it is a strange thing to be artists and you know, to collaborate together, and it's produced some interesting bands, but it's a tricky thing to hold together. I think maybe that's what this film's about. By the way, Tom, I would like to say that I think, you know, the festival, one of the reasons that it has such respect the world over is because you keep taking risks. I was scratching my head when I heard that you were going to give a documentary, a gala opening, and I think we would like, as subjects of the film, and I know Davis feels like this as director, to thank you for that unusual choice. So thank you.
Well, we had 35 years of made-up stories. Now the next 35 can be documentaries. Davis, can you talk about the experience of watching with the audience? I mean, there's always something different that comes out of the audience than sitting in your edit room by yourself.
It's interesting. Sometimes you don't know what your movie's about until after it's done. That, you know, it's falling from the sky down in a lot of ways, and it made me reflect. You know, one of the unspoken sort of heroes of the movie is Brian Eno, when he talks at the beginning and the end of the movie about what a clan is, and to see these guys not as rock stars but as a band of brothers, and what is unique about these four men that made them endure. And weirdly, it made me think about my own marriage. That the way to stay together, that these guys have this, you know, how have these guys endured? When you think of a great marriage and you say, how does that work? How do these guys stay alive together in this thing that the law of physics seems to pull against you? And so, you know, and brutal honesty, the things we talked about, the brutal honesty, you know, commitment to a bigger idea despite the fact that the world is pulling against you. So that when I watched the movie last night, I was like, oh, that's what it's about.
You have 3 spouses?
Well, I was going to say, a marriage of 2 must be easier than a marriage of 4.
Yeah. That's why you're registered in Utah. Look, it's also a particularly male problem. Men, as they get older, tend to rid the room of argument, and I think probably particularly men who feel they've achieved something in their life don't normally court a relationship where somebody is going to be able to tell you to fuck off on a daily basis. You know, you have your pride, you've achieved something. Why would you need this? And it's a very good question. And you know, it's like the male ego gets sort of calcified and brittle. And yet, if you can get through it, it's quite an efficient organism, the band. And
it's a real band.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference. And I was reading an article about plane crashes and how you're much better off if the co-pilot is flying your plane, because the pilot will always, the captain will always interrupt the co-pilot and contradict him and say, no, you're doing something wrong, that's wrong. But the other way around doesn't happen in some situations. The co-pilot is scared to question the captain, and you can get into problems. I think our band operates on the basis that anyone can question anyone, and that there's no demarcation. There's no, that's my area, don't criticize me in this regard. And that keeps it honest and healthy. I think
to clarify that means that my wife has to listen to me now. No? Okay.
Well, kind of building on that, we got a tweeted question from Jane Stevenson at the Toronto Sun. She said, you don't like looking back, but what did the process of making the film show you in terms of your creative process?
I think taking risks for us always seems to become a fruitful thing, and that's the way we operate generally anyway, but it was never more evident than on this particular project that playing it safe is the scariest thing that we could ever consider, and the riskier it seems, the better in terms of the results for us.
I found it very a little humiliating to realize that we were so inept, and these days we're a better band. We've learned our craft, and therein lies a huge danger, which is there's a giant chasm between the very good and the great. And U2 right now has a danger of surrendering to the very good. In those times, 20 years ago, and indeed before that, we were crap and great. There wasn't much very good. And I think that I was just reminded of how crap we were watching the film, and I just found it really awful. And yet, it was a self-imposed crapness. Like we were trying to make music that we didn't understand. And the band seems to do its best work when it's in that environment. And when it gets comfortable, it's not as interesting. And so there may be some more crap coming up as you try to, you know.
Who are some of the other musicians and bands that you look to as people who have had careers of longevity and reinvention and meaningfulness throughout their career?
I just would have loved to have seen The Clash now. Some bands, their kind of modus is wrapped up in adolescence and it's youthful music, but The Clash you know, they were interested in blue beat and ska and jazz and rockabilly and all kind of punk rock, lots of things. And I just would have loved to have seen Joe Strummer and that whole original lineup, Mick Jones, Paul Simon, Terry on the drums. Or I think about the Beatles like that, you know, I think that would have been just remarkable. And the Beatles, of course, are the blueprint for any band. And not just musically, but there's a thing about this film, which is why we went to Berlin, because we were sort of interested in what you might call the zeitgeist. We always are. It's a German word, but it's we all understand what it means, and it's the forces that shape the world are, you know, they can be from all sides: cultural, political, spiritual, tech, science, and we always tend to want to be where it's at. We're curious in all these things. It's not just going to be cultural, and the Beatles were like that. So you have them going to India to, you know, to study with the Maharishi and looking that. They formed Apple Records. They got into commerce. They were experimenting in lots of different directions. And I know that that's trying sometimes for our audience and for some people when they see us go off-piste, so to speak. And but I think that's part of what we do, and I think bands with longevity are the ones that have that sort of curiosity in the world.
I think of Miles Davis, because not only did he go through so many different phases and altered the course of jazz and music, but we met John McLaughlin recently for the first time, and of course we were asking him for any stories of working with Miles, and he hinted that Miles would sometimes be in the studio without necessarily really knowing what he was going to try and do, which was kind of reassuring for us, because clearly, having watched this film, you notice we do that too, and I think why he would do that, and certainly why we do it, is to get yourself out of the comfort zone, find yourself in a place where you have to be resourceful and creative because there's no other choice. And if you are in a comfortable place where you can rely on craft, previous lessons learned, inevitably that's the music you'll create, a comfortable sound. And we've just no interest in going there. It's the least interesting thing for us.
You know, we got a tweeted question from Peter Howell from the Toronto Star. He wanted to know if there is one movie and one album that you'd recommend to new filmmakers and musicians to hear.
A music?
An album and a film.
I think Torches by Foster the People is a very interesting new album. Very 21st century pop, but it's beautifully made and thrilling in a way.
Yeah. I should say he wasn't actually specifying a new album. He was talking about for new up-and-coming filmmakers and musicians. So
a classic. Okay. Well, still Torches. It's pretty great. See, we're always interested in the new thing, in some ways, because as a guitar player, particularly, it seems to me the guy who's just picked it up for the first time is learning the instrument that might stumble upon some new angle. And I'm always fascinated to see where it's about to go.
It's a great album, and it's great because it's a sort of act of defiance in very tough times for a lot of people. Canada is having a good run for the moment, but back home in Ireland and in the UK and south of the border, there's tough times. So seeing, you know, those melodies that are that brightly colored, that have joy as opposed to happiness, that's great. For me, a seminal album for us would have been Patti Smith's Horses. And if you're talking about brutal honesty, that opening line, Jesus died for somebody else's sins but not mine. When I was 16, I was like, I do not know what this woman is on about, but I better find out. And just that sort of sprawling quest of hers, her as a pilgrim is something that I have found great. I would always recommend. What about films? It might get louder, as it says. It's a documentary Davis has made on folk music. You got to do that. It might get louder. Sorry.
The sequel.
I have a Twitter one. May I try a Twitter one? From Tara Pratt. Who enjoyed dressing in drag the most? Bono.
Well, what's interesting is Larry, who really didn't like the idea, looked like he's in some skin flick. Edge took to it with a perfectionist's eye and ended up
I just freaked myself out because I looked so much like my sister.
Yeah.
I was like shocked.
Adam looked like the Queen of England, and I looked like Barbara Bush.
Here's one about the Trabants. Anyone keep a Trabant in the garage in Ireland, just for good times?
A very small one. Small one. No, unfortunately. But we have them in storage. In fact, some of them are at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. We painted them up for the tour. Some were covered in mirrored squares. Some were covered in fur. We did a sort of Klaus Oldenburg pop art thing with them, and they became really a big part of the tour, iconography.
That last one was from Dean Cooper. This is from Crystal Foreman. What is even better than the real thing? Is there anything that isn't finished on the... Sorry. What is even better than the real thing? Is there anything that isn't finished on the album? That's from Crystal Foreman.
On Acting Baby or on...
Maybe read that. I'm not a good reader.
I mean, the thing about this band is we don't really finish an album, it just gets released. And so there's pretty much every single song that we've ever released we would probably want to change in some ways, some profound ways in some cases. But we always get the chance when we play live to adjust things and change things around.
You know, you shouldn't really explain titles. Even better than the real thing is a sort of a pop art thought. But as I'm looking at it now, I'm thinking of Woody Allen's line, "There's no such thing as bad sex." And I think the carnality of it was an important part of what was going on in that album.
Has everyone seen the Damien Hirst video that he made for the song?
Yeah, he made a very special artwork which was only been shown once and will probably not be shown again, but it's at Glastonbury, the UK festival, and it's an extraordinary work of art. He's an extraordinary artist, and and he really went at it. But you know, sometimes these words or these thoughts, they become just kind of meditations, and you'll never fully understand them, but you feel them, you know. Is there anything that isn't finished on the album? There's a thing that's happened. The Q magazine, which is a very important music magazine in the UK, they have commissioned various artists to do a song of On Acting Baby to come out in the fall. And there's some extraordinary versions. Jack White does Love Is Blindness. Depeche Mode do You're So Cruel. Patti Smith, who we were just talking about, did Until the End of the World. Damien Rice does one. I mean, it just goes on. There's just a list of incredible artists. And it's strange because when I hear the album, when you two do it, all I hear is what's wrong with it. But when I heard all these artists doing it, I thought, that's really good. So.
Have you ever finished a song and say, I really like that?
Miss Sarajevo is the one that when I hear come on the radio, I don't cringe. and maybe because that's very.
One.
And I like if I'm out.
Yeah.
And you know, there's nothing worse than being out in a club and somebody puts on one of your tunes. It's like, oh, I was just having a good time. And but if Vertigo comes on in a club,
It's okay.
I think, ooh, that's okay.
That's good, because in the old days it used to be something like New Year's Day or Sunday Bloody Sunday, which is fine. But if you happen to be on the dance floor, it's kind of embarrassing when they play your song and then everyone leaves the dance floor because they can't dance to it. That's happened a few times.
Can I ask you a question about the making of this film? In making a documentary, there's always kind of a period of breaking the ice with the subjects and kind of, you know, getting through. So there's this feeling of trust between. Can you talk about that experience of breaking the ice with these guys?
I can't wait for it to happen. No, I mean, I think it really helped that Edge and I worked together on It Might Get Loud. I think no matter what documentary or movie you make, it's a relationship that just takes time. And I think I've been doing something different where I just do these interviews. Just me and the subject. I interviewed each member of the band separately, just sound only, alone with sort of no time limit, and it would just be a conversation. And some of that is just getting to know each other, and some of it's they have a wandering nature to them. I have zero plan for them, and it allows a conversation to start and a relationship to begin, and that. But it's still a process. I mean, last night was another step in the relationship, because it's still like there's something adversarial about making a movie about something that you don't know neither side wants, but it is naturally there.
Oh, it absolutely is. It absolutely is, and I'm still trying to figure it out how we let him in to the level that we did, and it's very interesting because we are as a band very protective and aggressive.
Well, for good reason, I think, because when working with people who have great intentions but maybe don't quite have the rigor of a filmmaker like Davis, you can be completely misrepresented with a project. And for me, when Davis agreed to do this, I felt I could relax, because I knew that the thing that he was most interested in was actually the truth, as opposed to what was a great shot, or what might kind of be sensational. And so he was very rigorous with us in the interviews. You know, if we were not kind of in the moment, if we were being self-conscious, he would change the subject, because he could tell when we were speaking without being in any way aware of the situation or what was going on, the process. And so the stuff that's ended up in the film are those moments where we're really being honest, where we're unguarded.
A little bit of a sensationalism would have been good. Few great shots. I just couldn't. I felt like I was mugged, and what really annoyed me was I didn't know I was being mugged because of the way he carries himself.
Well, pickpocketed.
Yeah, it was sleight of hand, and I'd be used to having the fight, bit of arm wrestling, all of that, but I just felt like I ended up in the trunk, bound and gagged. I saw this film, 2 rough cuts. The first time I was like, oh gosh, I know this is great, but I have to see it again to see how I feel about it. Second time I saw it, I really didn't like it. He didn't change a thing. And there was things that he was unhappy with, he changed. I think if they were, you know, I think I made 2 comments, I don't know, 3, you know. But lead singers are not great at being ignored. But it was, I'm really glad now. I actually nearly enjoyed it last night. And I think because I could see that I thought it would be very indulgent. I thought it would be a little well, it is solipsism, but actually, more importantly, this thing of wanting to unearth what it is that the creative process seemed to be of interest to the audience, and they were along for it. And I was like, oh wow! So I was quite relieved. But he's a remarkable filmmaker because his ego is the thing that he is prepared to put aside for the project he's working on, and so you have to put yours aside too.
You talked last night on stage about this being like watching sausages get made, but as people were coming out of the theater, I think they felt like it made the sausages more tasty. It gave them a bigger appetite to go back and try those sausages again. That's what my wife said anyways.
That's great.
Davis, you talked about doing these audio interviews with them, which come out in the film, and you know, sometimes we know who's talking and sometimes we don't. It's almost like it's a collective voice of this organism.
I say all the smart things. That's how you know.
That's true always.
Can you talk about that, the idea behind the way those voices are used in the film?
Well, I think it's actually showing you the rough cut was similar to showing Al Gore the rough cut of Inconvenient Truth. That there's, I mean, you've had your life in the media. You know, when we were 17 and 18 trying to figure out who we are, these guys were being talked about and questioned, and up until now. And that's true with a politician. And so there's a sort of an extra on guardness. But the other part about it is that the audience starts the movie with a relationship with these guys. Everyone who came into the movie last night was bringing the first chapter of the story to the movie. And so the movie has to fight against that baggage that people bring in, that the audience brings in. And so these audio interviews are an attempt to, interesting, what's effective is taking you off camera and keeping those interviews very stripped down and very raw and unself-conscious. So that in fact, the first person on camera is Eno, I believe, and it's a good 20 minutes in, and that's intentional, so the audience has a when you talk about writing, goes from the feeling of these characters, as opposed to, you know, the idea of these characters, and it is weirdly, you know, a kind of. You start your song from a feeling and an impression. The movie has to start that way too, to fight against, I think, what people are bringing into the movie.
This movie joins a long tradition of music documentaries. You can go back to the 1960s, films like Don't Look Back and Gimme Shelter, and I wonder if there are, you know, films like that or other insights into the making of other bands' music that you've learned from, or in the same way that fans approach this film and learn something new about your creative process. Have you learned things about other people's creative process?
Last Waltz. Martin Scorsese's The Last Waltz. I've seen it 10 times. I would recommend that for anyone. That was a real insight into a band, actually. And then they really didn't. That was the end of it. It was them at their peak, and then they were gone. What about you?
Don't Look Back. The Dylan film is such an incredible piece of work because it captures a moment in his career where he decided to turn his back on the folk scene, which had been he'd been the king of. So he effectively walked away from one fiefdom to sort of go and seek his fortune elsewhere, and that's kind of for us a great lesson again of somebody who does not want to be pigeonholed, is prepared to sacrifice a lot to move forward. And of course now we can look back and go, well, of course that was the thing to do, and he made all those great records with the band and whatever. But at the time, I'm sure he wasn't sure, where it was going to go and whether it was the end of his real success and but he made that decision to just go for it. And I think we would certainly be inspired by that.
Tom, have you seen the Neil Young documentary that's coming out?
Neil Young documentary.
Of course you did. I mean, he's
actually, which one? We're showing one here at the festival. Jonathan Demme has a new Neil Young documentary called Neil Young Journeys. This is the third collaboration that Jonathan has done with Neil Young. And this new one is a concert film filmed here in Toronto at Massey Hall just in May. This film was made faster than your film. And extraordinary concert, a solo show that he performed here.
He's a sacred talent. Listening to his music, you do feel like you should take your shoes off a little bit. So I don't think we can stay until Monday, but I really would love to see that. Jonathan Demme is an incredible filmmaker. I remember the impact of Stop Making Sense had a huge impact on us too. And I know, for instance, Arcade Fire, the same. It had a huge impact on them.
Stop Making Sense is a perfect movie. And a very obscure rock documentary called New York Doll. Have you seen New York Doll?
I love it. I've seen it.
And it's about this member of the New York Dolls who, he worked at the Mormon church, and in the genealogy department, and was called back by Morrissey to play. And he has to borrow. They fly him to London. He has to hawk his guitar out of hock. And to play with his band for the first time in years, has to borrow the bellman in the hotel's jacket because it has epaulets on it to perform. And he just plays one last time before he dies, just for the love of playing music.
Yeah,
it's so beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. I recommend you.
Davis, did you have some other Twitter questions we should work in while we?
Sure. From the creative type, is his name. On a scale of 1 to 10, how realistic was a possible breakup during the making of Achtung Baby?
Very. Yeah. Very.
Is very between 9 and 10?
Very is Irish for 9.
I think more than a kind of dramatic crash and burn during the making of the album, I think what was really at stake was the end of the trust that bound the four of us together. And I think that would have been a slow kind of spiraling down. So I think it was pretty close, but that's how I'm sure it would have gone, rather than, somebody storming out and breaking up the band. But in a weird way, that probably would have been more sad. That would have led to the end of the band.
We have one from Rebel T3I. Is Edge a perfectionist?
Oh yeah.
I try and be a perfectionist, but I'm not quite there yet.
It has to be said that, without this extraordinary talent that I'm sitting beside, there's nothing here, really. And because he has found a place for the three of us he's orchestrated the rest of the band and found a place where my voice fits, where Larry's drums and Adam's bass fit, and has really, if you don't mind me saying this, because guitar players tend to be blues based, you know, it's like white guys stealing blues riffs, turning and putting them through an amplifier, that he kind of invented something. And you you think of painters, and some painters own a color, like Van Gogh owns that color, yellow, and Yves Klein blue, and all the rest of it. Well, I think in the spectrum of music, there's certain tones and feelings that Edge owns, and that's a remarkable thing that there's emotions that hadn't been expressed. Those emotions hadn't been expressed before by a music group, and that's him.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. I think it's true to say that my guitar playing is absolutely a product of being in the presence of these three guys for the last number of years, and I absolutely wouldn't play the way I play if it wasn't for their influence. There's no way.
I mean, I help with the tuning and stuff.
Here's a very interesting question from Valerie. If you were to release a single from Achtung Baby in today's music world, which would fit best in the current music?
Even better than The Real Thing. And there's a mix of it, which is stunning. Deck Chair remix. I don't know what's the team is called. Fish Out of Water remix, which I would like to release as a single. I'm trying to talk some people into it even today. And it has the Damon Hirst thing. So Damon did his work to that mix, and that's the one we open an end of film with. I think that's really happening.
We've got about 5 minutes left. Davis, I had a question for you. You've made films like An Inconvenient Truth and Waiting for Superman that are, big controversial topics, and then you've made music films like this, like From the Sky Down. What's that like, moving between those two genres of sorts?
It's essential. I mean, these guys are so modest. You think that with Achtung Baby, the fans really wanted, Streets Have No Name, and with or without, they wanted, and you said when you first toured on Zooropa, that you've played the first 6 songs from Achtung Baby, and the audience was, these guys were, what's fascinating about this band, this great band, is that they really believe in reinvention and pushing themselves, and that's, and there are other great bands that I think stay in a very specific, safe range, and to me as a filmmaker, to say, well, what if instead of making a film about the electric guitar, let's bring in 3 different people, and I've never seen that before, and so to keep changing is great.
Do you take perverse delight in taking these very obscure subjects? I mean, I know the Edge, and you just heard me rhapsodize him, but I thought 3 guitar players, a feature-length film, how could you do that? Global warming, how could you do that? Education system in the United States. Is that your tickle? Is like really, do you sort of wake up, look in the mirror and go, I'm going to think up something now really difficult to do? And what is it?
I don't know. I mean, I like I don't like feeling safe. I don't. When I finish a day of shooting and I'm driving home and I go, wow, I really knew what I was doing today, and boy, I really nailed that. That's when I should be very scared. Yeah. It's that feeling of not knowing what you're doing and panic that it won't work out that is the most exciting. That once you start to manage that, it's a horrible feeling, but when you manage that, I'm sure it's true, then you realize that there's something unique and good and that makes you grow.
We tell all our junior engineers when we're in the studio that the times when you're absolutely sure that you should be recording the band, you probably shouldn't bother. The times when you're pretty much sure that you shouldn't be recording the band, you should definitely be ready to put the machine in to record, because that's when something great is going to happen. And it's out of the blue, unexpected, and not at all when, you know, the official red light goes on for us to perform a take. Often that's really not very interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, that's, you know, that's.
What are the questions you still have for the band after having been through this process?
Do you like me?
Yes.
That's a strong word. Let's not get carried away here.
I was feeling comfortable. Fuck.
We'll let that hang. We do need to wrap up, but as I said it before, we couldn't be more proud to show this film. Thank you guys so much.
Is there anyone here? Yeah.
We'll take one question since Bono asked.
In the movie, we see the genesis of one, and we see you guys react to it, and it's really moving and fascinating. And given the dimension that that song has taken over the last 20 years, it becomes sort of a global anthem. When you guys play it and sing it now, what does it mean? Because it was really interesting to see what it meant to you guys when you recorded it. What does it mean today?
It's a strange thing. Yeah, people play one at their weddings. And I mean, I really don't mean this
Just
in
shows
any.
that no one listens to lyrics. That's really what that shows.
Right. I would just counsel people before they make that choice, because it's a bitter pill, that song, and it's been used in. It's strange, and it connected in South Africa, connected in Bosnia, it connects with people fighting for gay rights. David Wojnarowicz, he died, he gave us his artwork for when we put it out. It seems to have connected in so many levels. Singing it now, I don't know. Some nights it catches me. Some nights we just, get it, just play it. But things change. It's very interesting. I was asking the question to myself why we might have agreed to this film, having spent our whole life consciously ignoring anything we did yesterday, let alone 10 or 20 years ago. And I think that we agreed to this because we're at that moment again where U2 has dodged being irrelevant. Well, U2's been on the verge of irrelevance for the last 20 years. Dodged, ducked, dived, made some great work. I hope along the way, and occasional faux pas. But this moment now, where we're at, for me, feels like really close to the edge of irrelevance. And we can be successful, and we can play, the big music in big places, but whether we can play this small music, meaning for small speakers of the radio or the clubs or where people are living right now, remains to be seen. And I think we have to go, to that place again, and if we are to survive.
You're going to have to come back in 20 years for the next film to see that. I have to be on stage in 15 minutes, so thank you very much, guys. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Tom.